Hello and welcome to another recording of The Sessions. I'm Dan Taylor and today I am joined by James Sanderson, who is the creative director of Everyday Something. They're a UK-based graphic design house who've worked with the likes of Oakley, Luxottica, the British Science Museum and BundoBust. Good afternoon, James.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, I've seen a little bit of an intro there. Could you just tell everyone a little bit of your background and what got you into graphic design?
My background is obviously in graphic design. I started studying in Bradford. I did the foundational course before going on to do graphic media communication at Bradford University. And I had a pretty good interest in photography, but kind of always wanted to use images and graphics as well. So I kind of followed that route through, and then ended up working at a small agency in Leeds. And then through that, I ended up, I went through a few different small agencies before setting up on my own. I took an existing client with me and set up EverydaySomething. And I've kept it quite small. There's only 3 of us now, and we kind of, obviously at the moment we're all working remotely, but we've got a small studio in Bradford, but we're currently moving over to Leeds. Yeah, and that's basically my kind of a quick fire journey of how I've got to where I've got to. But yeah, we work with some great clients, and yeah, our focus is on quality graphic design and branding really.
So that's the elevator pitch. But I mean, as you say, there's only a small team you've worked with some. I mean, namely like Oakley, and people know the likes of Luxottica, who obviously have Ray-Ban as part of the portfolio as well. So, given that and that you can attest to some of working in the luxury end of the market, and not wanting to call you old, but you have been around in the industry a while. What have been some of the trends you've seen over the past few years in terms of design changes, in terms of marketing, different approaches?
I think it's in terms of like the broadest sense, in terms of like brands themselves and how they kind of reinvent themselves. I think there's a lot of trends that you do see coming in, particularly when brands get rebranded. One thing that's kind of I've noticed reoccurring quite a lot in big rebrands is a kind of a house style of illustration which comes in, and it's quite to me it's kind of become almost like a go-to thing which brands use in the initial brand refresh, but then it seems to get filtered out and then becomes unnecessary further down the line. And I think for me, what starts to kind of become apparent is that illustration can be used in a brand, but it's not like it can't be used for everything, and it can't be kind of applied across the board. And I think what's apparent to me is that what works across the board and has more longevity is things like your basics, like do you have a typographic way of thinking across the board for the brand? Do you colors, for instance, they're the keys kind of thing to me, rather than this kind of, let's get like, we have to have this trendy illustration style throughout our brand. To me, it just kind of, it's kind of it only works for a short space of time and kind of gives the initial, I guess, refresh a bit of punch. But I don't think it's kind of got that longevity to it. That's one thing that kind of has stood out for me. In terms of other things that have happened recently, I think there's obviously a big shift towards motion. And I think brands are realizing that that's how they need to stand out now. Across social media, digital media, is kind of, motion is everything from how you kind of promote on a daily basis to how your logo appears on a phone, on social media. It's kind of, it's become the new normal really, I think. And I think it's only going to kind of continue. I think it's just the nature of, our attention as well. Like, we want to see things move. We're drawn to things that are moving over things that are static. It's kind of a kind of pretty, standard thing, I guess. But it's just becoming, brands have to do that now, I think. So for me, they're kind of 2, I guess, basic things that have definitely, I guess, they're not. It's not across the board, I would say, but I think generally the bigger brands and brands that are getting fully rebranded tend to have this kind of, let's go for an illustration style that everyone's using, but then it'll get thrown away. And then on sort of a broader scale, which I think is far more relevant and far more kind of useful, is brands dipping into, you know, motion and motion being part of the brand. I've seen a lot of brands as well, which also use kind of, they don't just use motion because that's what everyone's doing. They have a theory behind that motion. So one thing that sort of stood out as like really, for me, is like a super intelligent way of going about it was the whole Premier League rebrand. They actually had like a motion theory behind every single graphic, and that related to how players and the ball moves on the pitch. And I think that, you know, that sort of deep level kind of thinking, it's not so much a trend, but it's kind of pushing it really, if you like, and seeing how far you can go with that that idea of like, you know, it's got to move, but why is it got to move? But yeah.
No, I mean, so a couple of points just on there. So for those of us who aren't from this world, what is a house illustration style?
Well, I'd say like, say for instance, you are building up a brand and you've got a set of colors, fonts, images, or maybe you've not got the photography. Maybe you turn to illustration to enhance that brand and send your message out there. So you might have, you know, your brand might be incredibly friendly and cute. So you might specifically pick illustration styles that do have and reflect that nature. And then that then becomes part of your brand and your sort of brand voice, if you like, but a visual brand voice. But yeah, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. But yeah, that's it.
No, and also just kind of touching on the point around the Premier League as well, and how the motion kind of fed into that. But on the other side, I mean, this is a trend I've noticed a lot in sports, and this is potentially because of the need for digital reproduction and reproduction of certain brands on different multi-sized elements across different media, is the number of clubs who have gone on very extensive brand sort of rebrands, for want of a better word, with things like the crest. So two strong examples for me that stand out with that are like Brentford, who went from a fairly complicated crest to a simple one with a simple B, and Harrogate Town, similarly Yorkshire, who went from more traditional to again simple and round. Is that reproducibility similarly a trend not just in sport but you've maybe seen elsewhere as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a trend, but I think it's something that almost like has to happen now. I think obviously like you've got your football crest, you've got like car brands doing it, like they're pulling things back from their sort of chrome 3D logos into flat simple versions of their core logos. And I think it's just because this is the world we live in now. We're not the logo does not just sit on the front of a car and the side of a building. These brands have to operate across so many different formats and outputs that they have to be able to adapt. I mean, I know that people kind of do, there's almost like a backlash to it, I think, as well, because people, you know, don't like change and people don't want to see their beautiful, you know, chrome logo pulled back. But it's almost like, if anything, it's helping that brand. It's helping that brand adapt. And I think to me, it's just logical. It's just it's a reflection of the world. It allows that brand to be able to speak to different audiences across different, you know, all different formats that, you know, we're so used to. You know, we can't really you can't really have a chrome 3D logo that works well across everything. It's just not possible now. I mean, I think with anything, you know, there's kind of a cyclic kind of thing to it, and maybe further down the line, you know, these kind of old school logos might make a bit of a comeback in certain things. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, the augmented reality, for instance, that whole world, that 3D world. Maybe, you know, maybe there's something where brands go back to that in that way. You know, potentially, I don't know, but I think generally it is a trend, but I think it's logical to me. It's something that you know, needs to happen for a brand to be able to kind of work well today.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And the flat icon element of what basically all the car manufacturers now seemingly racing at the same time towards that flat icon like almost one did it and people reacted well, so now they're all doing it, similarly to what we've seen probably about 10 years ago when everyone had the dark, almost monochrome, almost matte style finish icons with their cars as well. With regards to how you said things were kind of cyclical, are there any cycles in design you're seeing coming back at the moment or emerging that you might be seeing emerging that potentially happened this year because of COVID, which potentially haven't been seen previous to this year?
I'm not sure in terms of COVID, but I think there will be a backlash against certain things. I'm from a rebrand perspective. I think there's almost like I guess like infighting in terms of the design industry, and kind of people just think people see the end product and they react in a way that's like they've not seen what the client said, what the budget is, but the reaction to like the full, I guess, mocked up brand, which people kind of just see the end, like the full billboard, the mocked up on a tote bag, that whole thing. I think there's almost like there's always going to be a reaction to that, which is I'm not really, it's almost templated. And I think that's almost like a trend in itself. Like you almost know what it's going to be applied to and how it's going to look, because they've got so many. You've got the kind of the mock-ups ready. They know they're going to do a repeat set of posters. They know they're going to use illustrations, so it's got to look good on a tote bag. And I think there's almost like to me there's a reaction of like, do we always have to do this same set? Can we not make it a bit more interesting? Can we not push it in a different direction that doesn't include X, Y, and Z? Because I think that's the issue, I guess. Now people are so used to getting these. We have this kind of polished, finished look, and that's almost directing what the creative is. And I think that, not to say that everyone does that, but there's some amazing design agencies that do amazing work that don't follow that route. But I think there's almost like almost like a top end set of I guess branding agencies that would not that I would name them, that kind of have a go-to set of finished article. This is how we present it. And yeah, I think it's almost like to me it's like people don't want to see that anymore. They're kind of almost sick of it. And I think people would rather see an alternative way of looking at a brand, rather than, does it look good on a pair of socks, for instance, which is not necessarily relevant to what does that brand want to do. To me, it's almost like, what I'm saying is almost like there's almost like this mock-up. It's not a mock-up culture, but like mock-ups are so polished and look so cool, but are they relevant to the brand? And I think, yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at. I think there's other things that we can go into detail with. I mean, I was going to sort of talk about illustration again, in terms of I've seen people kicking off about how illustration is overused in branding, for instance, and that brands need to get back to the basics of good typography, a good typographical system, grids, basic graphic design almost. But yeah, it's so subjective as well. So it's kind of like everyone's got their own opinion. Everyone's a lot more visually aware these days. So you're going to get a bad reaction out of somebody. You can't please everyone. It's like I guess there's so many factors basically.
Yeah, I mean, just touching on that and how you say that it's not so much, people see the end product, they don't always necessarily see that end process, and kind of nicely accidentally segueing off your mention of a bad reaction. For me personally, one of my favourite examples of rebranding, both from potentially late-ish, small mid-60s, 70s and modern day, is Leeds United. And obviously 2 years ago, they attempted to release a new crest featuring the Leeds salute, which, for those who don't know, is essentially a chest, which got massacred online by the world, essentially, and anyone with a Photoshop license. but also the fact that in the 60s, what many people don't really tend to know is that the symbol of Leeds United used to be a peacock, and that's where some of the colouring comes from with the yellow and blue. And the manager at the time, Don Revie, had a superstition that peacocks brought bad luck. So we had the peacock removed from essentially the club's identity for his tenure and time there. So I mean, kind of a question with that, in terms of you come out, you do the whole process, you release the finished product, the world effectively rips you a new one in making fun of it. Obviously, Leeds United backtracked. How do you then kind of go back to that drawing process as a designer? Because assumedly they'd have followed a very similar step, they'd have done some consultations, they'd have put the thought process behind it, and it's kind of, you kind of showing the drawing to mum, and rather than her putting it on the fridge, she's ripped it up, set it on fire, and then threw it in the bin. How do you, as a graphic designer and illustrator, kind of rework that process from there?
I think you've got to go back and ask questions. I think you've got to. There's a possibility that they may have missed a step, or may have overthought a process or something. I think what you need to do is like go back and question why it's wrong, how it became wrong in terms of like the audience's reaction, and maybe do some like market research, because I think particularly with something so big, that market research is incredibly important. You can still get the wrong answer, I think, and there's never just one answer to any sort of visual problem. I think as designers, you can't really get too downhearted about it, because at the end of the day, we're constantly coming up with ideas that get thrown back in your face, and people just, no, I don't like that. Part of when we do kind of branding jobs, we always kind of have that, well, I guess, conversation at the start, which is, we're going to come back with one solid idea, and if you don't like it, we're going to go back to the drawing board and start again. I think, there's not just one answer. People can get it wrong. It's very difficult because, I mean, I've been doing it quite a while, and you still get downhearted, and you still think, oh, gutted about that one. If something does get the bad reaction, it's just human nature. But we're not artists. We're trying to solve problems, and like I say, there's not just one answer. And if anything, it's like there's always something exciting to be found. There's always another approach which can, always better the last one. I mean, we're restricted by time and budget. That's what kind of forces you to submit something at the end of the day. So, you're potentially going to lose, profit, but at the end of the day, there's always another answer. But yeah, I think it's always a tricky one as well with the Leeds thing, I guess, and just generally now with design, you do have that kind of mob culture, which is quite difficult to kind of deal with. I've never dealt with it on that level. I'm not going to pretend that I have, but I guess, yeah, you just kind of grin and bear it, I guess, and get back to the drawing board.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
With that, James, I want to say thank you very much for your time and sharing some time out to share some of your experiences and what you see some of the branding process doing right or wrong. Where can people find you online, should they want to, after watching this?
If you just search Everyday Something, you'll be able to find us on, well, our website is EverydaySomething.net, and we're on Instagram and Twitter, ES Limited, on those two.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for your time, James. And
yes, thanks a lot.
This has been another recording of the Marketing Sessions, and thank you everyone for watching.
Cheers.